Look at the plane, that's incredible. We have a den of foxes, red foxes with 3 kits and 1 adult. Boy, they're growing up. Look at that. Unfortunately, that kind of boldness is not a recipe for a long life. It's the wary ones are often the ones that make it to adulthood. We really should charge into the field and yell at them and scare them, and then they'll be afraid of people. I like critters more than I like people for the most part, I have to admit it. They're so much easier to deal with. They don't argue. They just live their lives. They're just being themselves at all times. I mean, I can be loquacious and I can be friendly. I really can. But I'd rather be friendly with long-billed curlews and baby foxes. I have no idea why I do this. Except it's the most fun thing I can think of to do. I've really narrowed my list of fun things down, over the decades. This is a primal world, isn't it? This is a place where there are no distractions or diversions. This is a place where you don't get entertained in any kind of artificial way. There's a peculiar phrase, bald prairie. People have said to me, why would I go down there? It's just bald prairie and I've seen enough of that. And I wonder if they have. Because first, I don't see it as being bald. I see it as being wild. It's wild prairie. There are not a lot of trees, but there are some. Incredibly interesting ground cover here. From the grasses to the wildflowers. The shrubs. And it's a rolling landscape, it's not flat and boring. So bald prairie is a phrase people use who have never come here and have made up their mind beforehand that it won't be interesting. And they're missing out on wild prairie because it's fabulous and it's fascinating down here.
So here's the descriptors of it.
Yep.
Annual perennial herbs, leaves simple without stipules.
Yep.
Usually alternate, often succulent.
Yes.
Since
Yes.
flowers are small, greenish.
Yes.
Perfect for unisexual. We have mature flowers, but they seem like they would be small and greenish.
Yep.
And then it talks about produce singly or in dense clusters, calyx of 5 sepals or fewer. Can't tell.
Can't tell.
Grasslands National Park is situated within what we would call the northern mixed grass prairie. So there's different ways to classify the different types of grasslands across North America. Ours is defined by the latitude in which we are in and the species that grow within it and the soils that this grassland grows upon. And so in the northern mixed grass prairie, we're kind of at a transition of grasses So within the grassland communities that we see here, it's a mix of what grassland ecologists term C3 and C4 species. Further north you get, the more C3 species you get. The further south you get, the more C4 species that you get. So that makes this area unique. If you look at Grasslands National Park, situated geographically in an area that is utilized for agricultural purposes, a lot of those native grasslands no longer exist. So examples of intact native prairie are relatively rare, and having one this big in size as what we would have in Grasslands National Park is very important for trying to conserve the species within it, the vegetation that grows upon it, and then the wildlife species that utilize that for habitat.
So we have two drastically different looking places. In the West Block, comparatively speaking, there's more wildlife. So I'm standing at the edge of the Frenchman River, and the West Block is characterized by the Frenchman River Valley. A river brings life, a river gives life. So many animals and birds need this water and wouldn't be here if it weren't for this water. Just to my left is the bison crossing. The bison love to cross right here because it's shallow and a little bit broader than the river is in other locations. The banks are lined with red osier dogwood and wolf willow, other kinds of willow. A variety of buffalo berries. And animals utilize these. Moose eat the dogwood and the willow. The thickets also provide shelter for a wide variety of nesting birds, sparrows and warblers and kingbirds. So everything finds food and shelter along a river valley like this.
The East Block, it's a primal landscape, and it's raw. Because of all that exposed rock, there were more sharp edges, more clearly defined shapes to the landscape. A good way to describe it might be that when I walk into a scene, I'm trying not to attach labels and saying these are Badlands. I'm here to photograph Badlands. What I will think is, wow, look at the colors. And so you're taking the graphic components of your subject and in a way abstracting that. What happened here? I sort of saw the image whole. I didn't put it together intellectually. I didn't construct it out of a set of preconceived notions or ideas or rules. What I saw was the relationship between the foreground and the background. So these lines are exploding from the central part of the plant. They're coming right at you. They're exploding downwards, upwards, and out sideways. And once you get past that and you see this plant dominates, then you see where it's situated in a Badlands landscape. Oh, very interesting. We're in the Badlands.
Black-tailed prairie dogs are found in Canada only within Grasslands National Park and its immediate surroundings. We are at the northernmost tip of the species distributions across North America. The distribution of the species range from northern Mexico to southern Canada, and we are right at that extreme. Importantly, they are a keystone species, which means that they are important for many other species, including many more species at risk. They provide direct food. Example will be for black-footed ferrets or ferruginous hawks, but they also provide habitat. So burrowing owl, prairie rattlesnakes, western tiger salamander, mountain plover, all these species, one way or the other, depend on black-tailed prairie dog.
They're pretty interesting animals. The young are fun because they come above ground for the first time and the world is theirs to discover. They play and wrestle and chase each other around.
Oh, now there's two on that mound. Okay, that's interesting. I like that. They have surprisingly complex communication with each other. There are layers of meaning that we never even guessed at. For example, there's the jump yip, where the prairie dog goes up on its hind legs and almost looks like it's playing air piano, and it's a high-pitched squeal or bark. When the call is answered by other prairie dogs, the initial caller is more likely to stay above ground because that seems to indicate we're in a safe place. If it's not answered, there could be a predator nearby that's chased everybody else underground, and the prairie dog is more likely to disappear underground. They will gather bundles of dry grass and bring it underground. So a prairie dog with its mouth stuffed full of grass, standing on both sides, you can hardly see its face, is a kind of a cute sight. Photographers are like any other visual artist. And photography is an art form, if it's done right. We work with the same elements that a painter works with. We're working with shapes and textures and usually color and lines, putting those together in some sort of coherent way. So for anyone who is curious as to why I would keep doing this after 20 years of doing it and having thousands of images of prairie dogs in my file, or bison for that matter, or sharp-tailed grouse, or any of the other wildlife species, I mean, the answer is really simple. There are no limits to creativity. You can't duplicate your work and nobody else can duplicate it. Every situation is different and every situation reveals something. It's like a monster when you get this close to it. Whether I'm revealing something about my subject or just revealing something about myself is probably a moot point. The whole thing for me is about discovery.
The work that I do now is monitoring the black-tailed prairie dog population. So what we do is we count the prairie dogs that are in a 4-hectare plot, and we use that to estimate the population dynamics of each colony. So when we arrive on colony, we either hike to the site we need to get to, or it's right on the road. We set up our ladder, which is an 8-foot ladder, and we stake it to the ground so that it doesn't blow over if the winds increase while we're on it. Then we make sure that the flags are all in place so that we can see the boundary of the 4-hectare plot we're going to be counting prairie dogs in. Then exactly an hour and a half after sunrise, we begin our first count of the prairie dogs, and we do a count every 10 minutes for 3 hours. And within that period of time, we aim to get the maximum count of animals in that area, and that information is used to estimate the population of prairie dogs in grasslands.
Prairie dogs are extremely susceptible to drought. They tend to crash after a drought because of the lower overwinter survival and low reproduction that follows. So by collecting this data, we are able to continuously over time get a better understanding of how this population respond to climatic variation, which is a reality and a threat.
The prairie dogs learn really quickly that coyotes means business and is dangerous. You'll often see a coyote wandering right out in the open through the dog town. He's part of the landscape here. And I think the prairie dogs probably understand through the coyotes' body language whether it's hunting, whether it's seriously stalking them or not. And the coyotes learn rather quickly what will work and what won't work.
I got really lucky in the fall of 2017 when I realized that the coyote I was seeing in the upper Dogtown in the park was the same one. And I was able to identify her by a little bit of dried blood on the side of her face from some kill that she'd made that she couldn't really wash off. And then I began, after a while, I just simply recognized her. It was like she would arrive at 10:30 every morning and hunt the same territory, so I could set my watch by her, and I'd arrive at about the same time, sometimes a little early. I'd wait for her. I shot a lot of pictures of this little animal over about 4 months. She was learning how to hunt, and that was so interesting because they're not born with this knowledge. The first couple of weeks, it was so sad. She would try the random run where she'd run from prairie dog mound to prairie dog mound and chasing anything that moves and breaking off her chase, and they were just laughing at her, disappearing in their dens. So then she figured out they live underground and she tried digging them up. Right, good luck with that. She had no idea. I wanted to talk to her and say, no, don't do that. This isn't gonna work. If you were a badger, maybe, but you're a coyote. You can't do this. And so she gave up on that. And then I saw her targeting a single prairie dog and making a run at it. And she missed the first few times that I observed this, she missed. But one morning I drove into the park. There she was on cue in a ditch, using available cover. The grass was fairly tall that year, so that helped. And just as I pulled to a stop, she set off like a beeline across the prairie. She targeted one the way a cheetah would or a lion would target a gazelle. And she went straight forward. It was a little prairie dog that had wandered too far from its den and had its back to her, and it didn't look up until it was too late. She caught it in the open and dispatched it. I don't feel bad about this, you know. Really like coyotes, and that's how they live. So this is just the natural process. It's an intense moment, and it is life and death. I'm not here to dictate what pleasure or interest people can get from my photos. But I guess I'd like them to see it for what it is, without judging the predator. Because that's the way it has to live.
The thing about prairie is it's subtle. It's not in your face beautiful in terms of outstanding features, single things you can focus on. It's more a question of absorbing it, and to absorb it, you need to give it time. If you try to visit grasslands by racing from highlight to highlight, you're going to be disappointed. It's just going to look uniform. You'll probably find it boring. But if you get out and take a slow walk and slow yourself down to the rhythm of the prairie, see what grows here and see the little movements in the grass. Well, I'm switching to a macro lens here because I want to try some close-ups of lichens on rocks. Lichen has two organisms in symbiotic relationship, an alga and a fungus. The fungus dissolves the rock and in doing so creates food for the organism as a whole. They're among the oldest living things on Earth. So lichens actually can be thousands of years old. And they're fascinating, and they're overlooked, and they're colorful. For the technically minded among us, this is parallel plane photography. I'm lining up the plane of my sensor with the plane of my subject so that all parts of my subject are equidistant from my sensor, which means they should all be in focus if I stop the lens down. Okay, I like this too. Except I've lost my parallel plane now. I'm over top of it. It's quite a sharp slant, so I've got to drop the angle a bit. Try it here. Because I want the whole thing in focus. That's not a rule to live by, necessarily. It's just what I want now for this shot. This looked like a river to me, and this looked like a lake, and I was in really close, about like this. So it's just a tiny, like about a 1-inch section of one rock out of a million rocks on this hillside. And for some reason, it jumped out at me.
You see family vacation photographers stepping back farther and farther, stepping back and back to try to get it all in. But really the essence of photography is chopping everything out, distilling what's in front of you down to the keys, the salient points, whatever they may be. Everything inside the frame has to either contribute to the success of the image, or if it doesn't, it detracts from it. I try to do as much of that in camera as possible and distill it down to the essence. And sometimes I have to crop it even further. Many times I'm wrong and the image doesn't work. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to risk failure and shoot a lot of bad ones in order to get great shots. Because great shots don't come from formulae. Great shots come from some other region, and that's what I'm interested in, and that's what I don't really have any answers for or about, although I'm quite willing to talk about it. Creativity certainly doesn't emerge from order. It emerges from chaos. And that's what nature is.
It's a flower I don't see very often, so that's a good starting point. And I'm very fond of paintbrushes. You get brilliant red ones in the mountains. And here, you don't get the brilliant red ones. You get this very subtle pink and yellow version. So this is just a really ultra close-up detail of the flower itself. The other thing about this plant is it's really difficult to photograph. And I don't think I've ever gotten a great photo of this flower. I may have to settle for a good one. And even that might be beyond my ability. Maybe this is the way to do it. Because shooting down at it, all the lines of the leaf bracts extend sort of radial-like from the center. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Oh, I like this. Oh, good. Sometimes I surprise myself. I think it was Picasso said that every child is an artist, and the trick is how to continue being an artist after you're an adult. What that's all about is not losing your sense of wonder. So if you see all of nature, all of creation, if you will, if you see that with a sense of wonder and if you're just fascinated and enthralled by it. And there's always a great photo around the next corner. There's always something incredible that you're going to see or discover. No, it's not a chore, it's not work, and it's not boring. My introduction to Prairie wasn't in person. It was when I saw Courtney Mill's book, Prairie Light, in 1983. I couldn't believe how different it looked from what I was used to. At that point, I had lived in Quebec, Ontario, coastal BC, and I'd spent a year in the Yukon. And I'd never seen anything like the quality of light depicted in his photographs. And that was the first spark of interest. I thought, I think I have to go there. I like the dark and light banding, the shadows as they move across the hill. And every few seconds it changes. So you can see down along the river where those bright shrubs are at the bottom. You've got a pale band across there, and then you've got a shadow directly behind it on the other side of the river. And then you've got a sort of a high yellowish brown prairie above that, and then you've got a dark band of hills above that, including that little pointy peak. And then you've got a little bit of bright prairie hill in the background behind that. So it's all these successive layers of light and dark. So it's just a matter of each one of these is a moment that you'll never see again.
Because we can see for so far, we see such great distances. And because it's a dustier place than the coast, you tend to get atmospheric dust low to the horizon that turns our late and early light into amazing warm tones. colors retain their intensity even when they're far away. In most places you'll go in the world, you can have a beautiful blue sky, but it fades to white at the horizon. Not necessarily here. It's rich and blue as far down as you can see. It's wonderful light with which to work. When I've been staring through that viewfinder for 2 minutes even, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, setting up my initial shot. After that, I might make multiple exposures of it, but first shot. I forget the rest of the world exists. That becomes my whole world. And then I glance up and I'm startled and I'm in fact shocked that the rest of the world is still surrounding me. I've got the sky above and I've got the prairie stretching out that way and I've got the bison path behind me in it because I forgot about it. I forgot about it completely. The entire focus, it was all funneled into this subject, this one photograph that I'm trying to make. There's a level of concentration and an intensity and a willingness to stick with it that I didn't have when I was younger. And that's probably why I have a higher success rate now, because I'm able to push myself farther than I used to be able to, and willing to do that.
The bison population in Grasslands National Park is managed currently at around 400 to 500 individuals. In 2005, Grasslands National Park reintroduced bison from Elk Island National Park. At that time, bison were introduced primarily to restore grazing as an ecological process in this ecosystem. Bison, of course, are the natural and historic herbivore in this land. So grazing and the contribution of grazing to ecosystem health was the main objective. The program, however, over time has evolved, and now Grasslands National Park is not only using bison grazing to contribute to ecosystem health, but also because bison are a species of conservation interest in itself. Basically managing disease-free, genetically pure bison conservation herd.
Look at them running. Woohoo! Look at that, that's great. Wow! At this stage, I look for behavior. I look for the animal to be doing something interesting, especially if it's something I haven't been able to capture yet. Some new configuration of light and shadow and movement that I haven't got before. Calves nursing, anything that I haven't captured. All animals exhibit interesting and sometimes subtle behaviors. The trick is to get yourself in the position to be able to capture that and then capture the sort of the decisive moment. One of the factors in the national park here is that without people, they're more inclined to be closer to the road and in sight. Animals don't like us very much. They don't like spending time with us. That's just the reality. See, the reason I'm so taken with the calf is we don't see them very often here, because the calving grounds are way over the hills and they don't bring them around until well after calving season. Calving season is like May. The winter light is phenomenal because the sun generally stays low. When the light is low, it's also warmer because it's being filtered through more atmospheric layers than when it's directly above. Which is why sunsets are often red. You got to shift towards the red end of the spectrum. When you're photographing the prairie, you have to come to terms with space. It's the spaces between things that often define whether your photograph is going to work or not, or is going to convey a sense of the place. And you have to understand that a lot of Saskatchewan is empty space. The incredible vista, often with amazing clouds, and the space between this and that is you have to somehow incorporate that and convey a sense of it. So therein lies the challenge, and it's what overwhelms people when they first come here and start to look at this as a photographic subject. They're not quite sure how to do it, what to make of it. And it takes some deep looking, and it takes some familiarity. So with this lens, I've got a sweeping view from about there to there, and the moon's in it. And the horizon is almost level. I like the way this projects, You've got all these round shapes leading down to the water's edge, and then because you get the water splashing over it. So When I set up, the reason I sometimes wait is I'm trying to determine whether I want the water in mid-splash, the water covering it, or wait till the water's passed. And the water kind of comes in pulses and they're irregular, so it's a lot of guesswork involved, and that's why I shoot a lot. You see, there's water and there's air bubbles flowing underneath the ice surface. So you see how these patches of dark and light are traveling under the ice.
James is extremely educated and James is extremely ethical. And it's good to sometimes discuss with him, not so much about photography, which we can learn a lot, but also in general about things, natural things. Just because he's out so often, sometimes he sees species that maybe I haven't seen.
I think that's so far into the park that...
Or he tells you and describes you behavior that are just interesting to know. I really consider James in a way as a peer for us that work in the park.
You can stand up there in the hills and look at the horizon, and the prairie seems to go on forever. The wild prairie seems to never end. But it does, and that's the reality. It's finite. You have to think of the prairie, despite its apparent vastness, as an island in a sea of agricultural and industrial development. And all prairie preserves are exactly that. So you can stand and survey terrain that appears much as it did hundreds of years ago. I mean, for me, that's an incredible experience to have. It looks wild. It feels wild. Time after time after time, I come home feeling rewarded and feeling connected with the wild prairie of Grasslands National Park. For me, it would be impossible to live in Saskatchewan without connecting to the land that's here.